Hello, everyone. It's Mrs. Wallace. I hope you had a great break and that you had some rest, and all of that is really good. I know that time goes really quickly. It's hard to believe we are back. But before class on Thursday, if you just check out this one short lesson, this is about shifting cost curves. We have been introducing especially the per unit cost curves, average total cost, average fixed cost, and average variable cost, also marginal costs. We've been drawing them a little bit, and we'll practice some more in class tomorrow. But while we're working on that, just a reminder that these cost curves can shift, and this would be an outcome of increases or decreases in variable or fixed costs. Okay, so just so you know, I'm using some slides that come from ACDC Econ, so want to be able to just kind of give a shout out because I'm using their slides. I purchased them, and they kind of describe some of the shifting cost curves in two formats. One is by looking at some data tables, which is really typical for a unit like this to spend some time looking at cost curves in a tabular format, and then also, of course, to look at them graphically, which is another aspect of what we're doing. Just to remind you of some of the different kind of information that we've been looking at with costs. We have our total product, or quantity of the product. If we think about everything related to costs is generally related to the production of a tangible good. Okay, so say cell phones, for example, total product is the quantity of cell phones. So the first cell phone, what happens if we make two cell phones, if we make three, on average, what are our costs? In total, what are our costs? And on a marginal basis, what is the additional cost of the third cell phone? Okay, we can see our total variable costs. Okay, remember, variable costs would be related to the cost of resources that you have to increase as you make greater and greater quantities. So you want to make more cupcakes, you need more flour, that would be a variable cost. Fixed costs are those costs that are constant regardless of how much quantity you make, right? So total fixed costs are constant, and the total cost would always be the sum of your variable costs and your fixed costs. Marginal cost, of course, is the additional cost to make the next unit. So the next cell phone costs an additional X dollars. Average variable costs and average fixed costs speak to if we were to look at making, say, 4 units, on average, how much of the cost is variable cost, on average, how much is the cost fixed cost, and on average, what is the total cost. So for each of those 4 units, what would be my total cost? Okay, and I could, of course, also figure out my total cost from my average total cost, and we addressed all of that in class. If we look at shifting cost curves, okay, what happens if fixed costs increase? Okay, so say that I'm paying rent and it's usually $100, and then all of a sudden the fixed cost increases by $100. What cost curves are going to change? Okay, so clearly, my fixed cost curve column, that constant, $100 is now going to jump up to $200. Okay, so that's fairly obvious. We also know that, of course, our average fixed costs are also going to change, right? Because now my fixed costs have changed, my average fixed costs will also change. But of course, my total costs are going to change also, right? My total costs have now jumped up by an extra $100. If my fixed cost jumped up by $100, my total costs have jumped up. Okay, so on the total, in the category of total costs, fixed cost increases lead to total cost increases. What else is going to change? Okay, in terms of per unit, okay, we're only going to see average fixed costs increase and average total cost increase. And this is a really big takeaway. If your rent increases, okay, your average fixed costs are going to increase and your average total costs increase. Because both fixed costs and total costs increased, one thing that doesn't change at all, your variable cost curve doesn't shift at all. Your average variable cost curve doesn't shift at all, okay, because it's not related to fixed costs at all. The other thing that does not shift is your marginal cost curve, okay? And the reason for that is you can kind of look at marginal cost being very connected to the change in variable cost, right? Because fixed cost is constant and variable cost isn't, what is really kind of leading to the slope of the marginal cost curve, has to do with the change in the total cost over the change in quantity that is very connected to the change in variable costs, okay? So marginal cost does not shift at all when fixed costs change, and that is going to be important for us down the road. What this looks like graphically, okay? If we have an increase in fixed cost, and in this case, I'm only looking at my per unit curves. I'm not looking at total fixed cost, which is constant and would definitely increase, or total cost, which would increase. But in this, if I saw an increase in fixed cost, what would happen? My average fixed cost curve would shift upward, okay? As well as my average total cost curve would shift upward, okay? And you can kind of see ATC1 versus ATC, or AFC sub 1 versus AFC. That gives us a sense of, once the cost curve shifts, okay, we no longer have the older cost curve, we only have the new cost curve, okay? We tend to label them using numbers, sub 1, sub 2, sub 0, sub 1, however you kind of indicate a change in your cost curves. Of course, if it was a decrease in fixed cost, you would have the exact same cost shift, but it would be, in a decreased fashion. So ATC would shift downward, AFC would shift downward, okay? If you have a change in variable costs. So what happens if variable costs variable costs for variable resources increase? An example of this might be the minimum wage, right? So if you happen to be running a business like McDonald's and you have workers that are getting paid by the hour, they are a variable cost. And if the wage goes from, say, $11 an hour to $15 an hour, that's an increase in cost, okay? So what is going to change as a result of that, okay? Well, we know that variable costs are going to increase, okay? So the total variable cost will increase if your cost of variable resources increases. Your fixed costs, of course, are not going to be affected because they are really a different category of costs. Your total costs are going to be affected, okay? So because variable costs increase, your total costs will also increase, okay? In this case, for per unit, okay, what happens with per unit costs? We are going to see our marginal cost curve shift. When variable costs increase, your marginal cost curve increases, okay? So we actually see a shift upward in that, check mark shaped marginal cost curve. We also will see a shift upward in the average variable cost curve, okay? Average fixed costs will not shift because they're connected to fixed, but average total costs will shift, okay? So unlike fixed cost changes, we have a change in marginal cost, okay? No change in AFC, but a change in AVC and ATC. Average total cost will change regardless of whether you have a change in fixed costs or variable costs, okay? The really big takeaway is only variable costs increasing or decreasing will actually affect marginal costs, okay? And that's a cost curve that we pay a lot of attention to, so that becomes useful to note. For our variable costs, okay, note what will happen is your MC will increase, okay? So that's what an increase in MC looks like. Kind of look at the way in which it shifts a little bit upward and, kind of maybe a little bit leftward, but is primarily an upward shift. The same thing with AVC, okay, which is now upward. Remember that even when you have shifts in cost curves, mathematically, you always have to have the minimum point of AVC and ATC, be where marginal cost intersects. Marginal cost will always intersect ATC and AVC at the minimum point. So even when each of these curves is shifting, you still have that same relationship, okay, because ATC and AVC are averages. So as you look at these shifts, kind of see how you would graph this if you had changes in your variable costs, okay? Just that's the only thing that I'm going to introduce at this point. We'll spend some more time time tomorrow looking at these shifts and practicing them, but I wanted to just introduce you to the idea of when a variable or a fixed cost changes, what we're talking about when we're talking about shifts, okay? Be well, everyone. We'll see you in class tomorrow. Short video, okay? Have a good rest of the day.